You're listening to Opera Box Score.
Let's get ready to rumble!
Wherever you are, however you're listening, it's America's talk radio show about opera. It's Opera Box Score. I'm George Cedarquist, joined this week by Oliver Camacho, kind of, and Weston Williams. All right, in this episode, we go inside the huddle with Ryan McKinny. The American bass baritone will reprise his role as Joseph de Rocher when Dead Man Walking finally makes its Met debut next season. Oliver talks to Ryan about that Jake Heggie opera and the one that he's about to tour with, Music of Remembrance. And then, Apple Classical, is it worth it? Weston's got an answer to that in free throw. Plus, 2 in a drill. Is LA Opera finally rid of the nightmare that is Placido Domingo?
We can only hope.
Make sure you subscribe to the podcast, Stitcher and Spotify. You click follow on Apple Podcasts. Hit the plus sign. Send us a voice memo or email us your hot takes, operaboxscore@gmail.com. You're going to get that OBS beer coaster and the OBS lapel pin just for sharing your own hot take. It's that easy. Weston, we finally got rid of the chaff, and now it's just the wheat of the show.
Just the two straight white guys on the podcast, you know.
Well, Oliver's going to be doing Inside the Huddle in a second, but I don't know. Sometimes less is more, Weston. You know
yeah, it's true. It's true.
You know
I mean, but between the two of us, the average height of our co-host has not changed compared to the height of everyone, so it's fine.
Years ago, there was a TV show called Wipeout, and one of the hosts of it was a guy called John Anderson, who's an ESPN Sports Center anchor legend. He made a mistake, and last week...
Did he wipe out?
Well, no, he certainly wiped out on the mic. He was running some highlights from a Vegas Golden Knights NHL game, and he referred to Zach Whitecloud, who is the only current member of the NHL from the Sioux Valley Dakota Nation. Apparently Anderson didn't know that because he says, what kind of a name is White Cloud? It's a great name if you're toilet paper.
Oh no.
So here's the thing. So Anderson blew it, right? And the next day was like, this says, quote, "This is totally on me, and I sincerely apologize to Zach, the Golden Knights. My job's to be prepared and know the backgrounds of the players, and I blew it." And get this. Zach Whitecloud says, "I'm proud of my culture. I'm proud of where I come from, where I was raised, who I was raised by. I carry my grandfather's last name, and nothing makes me more proud than be able to do that. In our culture, we were raised to be the first ones to reach out and offer help. So that's why I reached out to John this morning and accepted his apology." No cancel culture, no nasty tweeting. Just a guy who blew it and blew it big, and another guy was like, "Hey man, you know what you did, we know what you did, I know what you did. I accept your apology."
If you would like to cancel George Cedarquist or tweet it, actually really tweet nasty comments at us because our Twitter page is basically dead at this point.
No,
so the more activity we get, the better. So I'm asking you right now, cancel George Cedarquist on Twitter and we'll send you a OBS lapel pin and whatever else we have in the box, the opera box.
Let's talk some opera.
Huddle up. Let's go inside the huddle.
Ryan McKinny is about to embark on the U.S. tour of Jake Heggie's For a Look or a Touch, a Holocaust-era opera, as part of Music of Remembrance. OBS listeners might remember Ryan's name when we were amazed at one of the early COVID opera editing projects he tackled for Houston Grand Opera, the studio, and his filmmaking has continued to be part of his portfolio of skills. Well, before we jump into the conversation between him and Oliver, let's listen back to a milestone moment in his career, singing Flying Dutchman in the 2010 Operalia competition.
just a little bit of the aria for The Flying Dutchman, sung by Ryan McKinny from the 2010 Operalia competition. Welcome to Opera Box Score, Ryan McKinny.
Thank you so much for having me. I'm super excited to be here.
So that was in 2010, which I'm going to go ahead and call like the competition era of your life. Just a few years before, you were famously in the movie The Audition. And I think just about everybody who was like a finalist that year, like has a career of note.
Yeah, it's been
and one passed away. So
yeah.
And then you represented the U.S. in the Cardiff competition. Go USA! Thank you very much. Do you feel like those experiences, Operalia, The Audition, Cardiff, gave you maybe more name recognition at that time?
Yeah, for sure. I mean, you really can't, when you're a young singer, that's the best way to get people to know about you. They're kind of a double-edged sword, right? Because they're like, not really what we do. It's kind of an aria competition, which isn't the same as like being in a role in an opera. So,
right.
And it's also like terrifying for a young singer. It's just, I remember that Die Fristes was like, I was so excited to be singing at La Scala and, Placido Domingo's conducting, but also just freaked out.
And it's an aria about serenity. I mean, like the way that thing is built, you've just got to be so calm and build your climax like so slowly, like incrementally. But it's I also feel like, I don't know how old you were when you did that, but you don't expect somebody in their 20s to be singing that aria,
Yeah, I mean, I think I was about 30.
Okay.
Yeah, I sang Wagner before people really wanted me to sing Wagner, and I'm kind of fine with that. Like when I talk to young singers now, I think a lot of it is, on some level, you have to sing what you love. And if your voice fits that, that's great. And mine did, to an extent. Obviously, like you don't quite have the power you're going to have. Like now I can sing Dutchman with a lot more ease than I could at 30. But yeah, I think as long as you're doing it in a healthy way, it's fine. And especially in a situation like that, I wasn't going out and singing the whole role yet. And the monologue that I sang is kind of the easiest part, believe it or not. But yeah, I think, you normally see people sort of work up to that a little bit more than I did, but.
Well, is your calendar cleared in case Nicholas Brownlee needs a day off this summer?
I love Nick, actually, and I'm super excited for him because, I've sort of like been following him over the years. He was at Rice when I was at HGO and sort of would ask me for advice. And I remember teaching him in a masterclass. So it's really cool to see him having such a great success.
Nicholas Brownlee is going to be singing Dutchman at Santa Fe this year.
Yeah.
And another thing you've done with Nicholas Brownlee is record Suoni la Tromba during COVID, which was hilarious. And I wanted to pivot to that topic because another way that your name came into my consciousness was in the Houston Grand Opera COVID era finale to Marriage of Figaro, which was at a time when we were all like, oh my God, how are we going to do this? And it was mostly very sad type of Zoom trying to collaborate with a pianist in a different city that it was what it was, but none of it was stuff that I think we'll ever go back to and enjoy. But that video that you made with were they the young artists?
It was the Houston Grand Opera Studio singers.
Well, if you haven't seen it, we'll put a link into the show notes for today to remind you what that was all about. Wow. I guess we all had a lot of time.
Yeah. I mean, it was kind of interesting because I have filmmakers in my family and so I kind of had been thinking about doing some stuff like that anyway. But, I was lucky to have like my first gig that got canceled was with Houston Grand Opera, and they were paying some of the fees, even though they were canceled. And then some of the rest of my colleagues were like totally out of luck and really having a hard time. And so we were like, well, what kind of stuff could we do to, raise a little money for artists that were hurting? And decided, at first I was like everybody else, I was like, I'll get a friend to record a piano track and I'll sing something, but quickly realized like it could be fun to do like whole scenes and stuff.
So, Houston Grand Opera know that you had that skill?
Yeah, I don't think they did. I asked them actually if they wanted to have the studio participate in something, and I had the idea to do that. The finale from The Marriage of Figaro. I know that piece really well. I've done it a lot, and it's fun to. It was very fun to just figure out how we were going to do it. Just because we only had everyone just had cell phones. I mean, it was stuff they had at their house, to turn into props and things. And I just arranged it on the screen and told them exactly what direction to sing to. And nobody was in the same place the whole time. So, but it was kind of this weird time of kind of experimental opera. We were trying to figure out what to do, and a bunch of weird and fun things came out of it. And that was certainly one of my favorites.
You're working on a documentary with Stephanie Blythe and Jamie Martin.
Yeah. So the Chicago Opera Theater actually had us film their performances of Carmen from last year with Jamie and Stephanie. And so we filmed the performances and also filmed a bunch of behind the scenes and interviews and things like that. It's just a really fascinating way that they put it together. And I don't know how much of the story everyone knows, but in this particular version, Stephanie Blythe was singing the role of Don Jose at pitch, as a tenor. And
yes,
and
I was there.
What's shocking, and this, but it was shocking to me the first time I heard a rehearsal, because I thought, it's going to sound like a mezzo singing Don Jose, but she sounded like a tenor, like a world-class male voice tenor. You close your eyes, you would have no idea. And so, we kind of, and then also Jamie doing her first Carmen and being a person that, has wanted to sing that for a while, but hasn't been asked to by different companies, and her story, and then the company's story in general. So we're still trying to find some funding for it and putting finishing touches on it, but I hope it gets out in the world.
Well, that's super exciting. And you give us a reason to talk about Chicago Opera Theater, which is where you will be later this month.
Yeah.
Singing the gay Jake Heggie Holocaust opera.
Yeah. When you put it that way.
No, it's actually, that's the thing I love about Jake Heggie is that he has a sense of humor, and he understands the different, you have to have light in order for the dark to feel dark, but if it's dark all the time, then it's just like, oh God, I can't watch this. But for a look, for a look or a touch is one half of Music for Remembrance. Is that what it's called? Yeah,
Music of Remembrance is the organization that put it together, that commissioned it. And then the other piece that's with it is called Another Sunrise. Mm-hmm. Yeah, and it's amazing. I think what you were saying is totally true. And I find this in Dead Man Walking, which I have sung before and will sing again next season. This super heavy subject, but there's all of this joy in it and humor, and it kind of seamlessly works. For a Look or a Touch is really a big chunk of it is fun and about these people that are in love, and it's really it's a love story primarily, and the Holocaust is kind of the backdrop for it, which of course makes it really dark in a lot of spots, but it's actually not like a super depressing piece to sit through. It's really beautiful.
There's dancing,
really joyful. There is, yeah.
So you mentioned Dead Man Walking, which is a role that you sing Joseph de Rocher. And you sang it in Chicago, and now that opera is finally making it to the Met.
Yeah.
And you get to sing Joe.
It's crazy.
Congratulations. That's
wild.
Amazing.
I agree with you. I mean, I'm just like over the moon about it. I'm so excited, and to get to do it with Joyce and Yannick Nézet-Séguin conducting and Ivo van Hove directing, opening the season. I mean, it's kind of a dream come true. So yeah, I'm really, really excited about it.
So is the beard you're wearing right now, is that part of your look for your Joseph?
I think it will be. Yeah, the beard's actually been here now for the last several years. I'm going to get some new pictures because everyone always asks me about it. But yeah, I think we did a photo shoot, which you can see if you go to the Met website, and I have the beard in that. So I guess they're going to let me keep it for the fall.
Well, maybe we should talk a bit about your physicality in this role, and how you stay in shape to be in your boxer shorts in front of. Well, now you'll be this will be in HD, right? So in front of maybe millions of people.
Very, very high definition. Yeah, I mean, there's a couple parts of it. One is, like you want to look good on camera, blah, blah, blah. But also like in that particular role, you have to do push-ups while you sing, and it's kind of a lot of them. So that is something you sort of have to get ready for. But to be honest, like for the last, I would say 15 years or so, I've been pretty fitness oriented in general. So I don't have to, I don't sort of like get ready for a show so much anymore. I just like kind of staying in shape. I like to rock climb, I run, I lift weights, I do all kinds of stuff, whatever's like the thing that in the town that I'm doing that seems interesting, I do jiu-jitsu. So yeah, it's not so much like get ready for the show thing anymore. Although when I was younger, I would do that and, eat chicken and broccoli for months or whatever stupid stuff people told me to do.
the dead man walking diet.
Yeah.
So is there anything that you would tell other male singers or maybe even female singers what you shouldn't do? Did you learn anything like, that's not really great for singing, this particular thing?
Yeah, actually, I just I put this video out this last week on Instagram. When you're weightlifting, you listen to like power lifters and they grunt a lot. Yeah. And if you can put the kind of pressure like in a hissing sound, like it's rather than that saves you a whole bunch of headache. But then there's also like you have to be careful with like jujitsu, for example. I won't do like when I'm about to do a show because you get somebody like choking you and it's it can be bad for your voice. But I would say in general, like you're way better off as a singer being physically fit and exercising a lot than you are not.
In jiu-jitsu, do you have to do like those sharp noises that like verbalize the sharp? Okay.
No, so jiu-jitsu is more of like a grappling kind of thing, and it's essentially like wrestling. And yeah, so there's not a lot of like kind of stuff.
Exactly. I don't know what you call that.
Involuntary.
So one of the topics we always like to ask our guests, especially if they have families, is what is your support system like? What was the conversation like about, whose career is going to take a backseat while we do XYZ? Or did you just bring in more people to like, rally the troops and help you out?
Yeah, I've been so lucky. My wife Tanya and I and our kids Emma and Lewis, who are now 17 and 13, have traveled together really for the entirety of my career, and we homeschool them, but also Tanya does a lot of remote work on our real estate business and some other stuff, and is a director in her own right, but luckily is able to do that on the road with me. And yeah, we've been doing that going on, 17 years now, really, since Emma was a baby. You'll see, even in the audition back then, if you watch that, I think Emma and Tanya are both in it. Emma's a little tiny baby, but, that's always been really important to me. And in a way, I think, I probably could have gotten further in my career sooner or something like that if I hadn't wanted to focus on my family so much. But, it really grounded me. It kept me sane. It still does. And I think, a lot of singers are kind of unhappy people because it could be a really rough lifestyle, traveling all the time, often alone. And so that's really like saved me over the years, and I love it. And I'm super grateful to Tanya for being willing to try it. And we've had a lot of great adventures, the four of us.
Have your kids had any cultural experiences that they would not have gotten otherwise?
Oh yeah. I remember we were in Seoul, Korea. I was singing Marriage of Figaro there, and they like just started playing with these kids at a playground, all Korean kids. None of them spoke English, but they like figured out this game to play. It was like a
Squid Game
kind of thing. Yeah. And they, yeah, exactly. Not, luckily not, but yeah. But they've had a million things like that. And I think there's certainly trade-offs. Like there's a lot of reasons why it's really difficult to do, and it's not for everybody, but they have had amazing experiences all over the world, and kind of have a sense of like people everywhere are generally people, there's not as many differences as we think there are. And so I think overall it's been really great for them, and certainly great for me.
And the homeschooling thing, since you brought it up, what type of preparation did you have to do to be able to teach your kids?
Yeah, I mean, luckily we live in an era where there's like so much in terms of resources for that. I think most people think like you're sitting down with a stack of books with your kids and reciting to them all of the knowledge of the universe. But, nowadays, often what you're doing is kind of working through things with them based on materials that are available online or whatever. Especially since COVID, now there's just, a million different things. And so we've done sometimes more like online school rather than strictly homeschooling. And we've dabbled in like just letting them do whatever they think they should do, and kind of found a happy medium for us. But yeah, it does take a lot of time. And I was definitely involved for a long time too. Tanya and I did it together, and it was challenging. But now, they're old enough that you can kind of be like, okay, like we didn't totally break them, and they're smart. Like they can talk to human beings like, normal. But yeah, and homeschoolers are interesting because there's kind of you run the gamut from super conservative Christian, keep their kids home because they don't want them to learn about evolution. You have a lot of like hippie, we're going to go live in the mountains and like eat foraged berries all day long. And we sort of did it out of necessity. So we don't quite really fit into either of those camps, but we have met a lot of cool people that have helped us kind of figure it out along the way.
Yeah. Like those people in Tennessee who won't put on Marriage of Figaro because the Carabino thing is just too confusing for audiences.
Yeah, it must be very confusing for them.
Well, we haven't spent enough time talking about your artistry, and I want to close by hearing some of your Grammy-winning recording with Michael Tilson Thomas and the San Francisco Symphony of his settings of Rilke poems, Meditations on Rilke. We're going to hear a bit of Herbsttag. Do you remember making this record? It was just a few years ago, but do you remember this experience and the whole thing with Michael Tilson Thomas and like, getting dangerously close to losing him? And Rilke just, I feel, is like the poet that actually addresses those feelings very well.
It was an amazing experience, especially when I think about the year before he sat me down and like played me some of them, and said that he wanted me to do them and was writing them for me. And, for anybody that's ever like sat down and listened to a composer's music that they haven't shared with anybody, there's like a lot of pressure. And I remember being scared that I wasn't going to like them. What would I say? But then I loved them. And it was amazing. It was just, it was a wonderful experience.
Ryan McKinny, thank you so much for being on Opera Box Score.
Thanks so much for having me.
Clip from Michael Tilson Thomas's Meditations on Rilke, Ryan McKinny with the San Francisco Symphony, conducted by MTT himself. Again, make sure you subscribe to the podcast, Stitcher and Spotify. You're going to click follow. Apple Podcasts, you just hit the plus sign.
It's so easy.
Free throw.
Last week on the show, we hyped a 2-part listener mailbag. Nayusha had written in from New York City, and their second entry was about the production of Lohengrin at the Met. We were going to leave it for this show, not realizing that Weston and I would be the two guys on this show, the two cis-het,
the two white
guys
males
on this show, which is not the team that, at least in isolation, wants to tackle Nayusha's listener mailbag comment. So we are going to take their comments and kick it once more down the road, get a more diverse panel to tackle what is really quite a brilliant listener mailbag. A little bit more in our wheelhouse is Woody in DC, who writes in to say, hey, OBS, Washington Post had an obituary of Grace Bumbry, 42 curtain calls. Wow, she must have been amazing. In other news, one of the highlights in our area the last few months was a production of Fellow Travelers.
Ah, yes.
At Virginia Opera. It sounded great and it looked great. It's so funny that they're doing Fellow Travelers just in the DC area, because like that whole opera it's all about Washington, D.C. and the Lavender Scare. And,
yeah, exactly. It's very topical.
Yes, exactly. We're going to do a free throw then in the meantime and get back to Weston and his experiments with Apple Classical. Weston, first of all, how much is it costing?
Well, I mean, it comes for free, asterisk, with your Apple Music subscription. So if you already have Apple Music, you can try it out very easily, and you probably already have. If you are not, well, that's what this segment is for. So like a lot of classical music people, opera people especially, you might feel a little bit left behind by the state of streaming, right? This is what
am.
This is George is still getting used to LPs, so he just listens on Lacquer all the time. The big thing that the market that Apple is trying to go for is this remaining holdout of physical media in the classical music world, because right now classical music is the only thing keeping CDs alive. It's a big portion of the vinyl market. And Apple has decided, oh, we've had enough of this, so here's a bone. And so basically the pitch is that you have a standalone app just for classical music, which will be separate from your Apple Music app. It streams as high definition as they can possibly squeeze out of the files they have on hand, which means we're talking about, high quality WAV files, some Dolby Atmos in there. They also have a few new ones that are made for Apple Spatial Audio, which I don't have because I don't have Apple headphones, so I can't really speak to the effectiveness of that from an audiophile standpoint. But they're streaming losslessly, basically, is the big selling point. Now, interestingly, this is something you could already do with your Apple Music app. You just have to go and fiddle with some settings first, which can be annoying.
Okay.
But once you know that, it feels like, well, how necessary is this really? The big advantage in my mind is the ability to search for classical music composers, singers, and specific pieces, specific works. And it's very forgiving in the search engine if you're talking about alternative spellings, which is very important, right?
Diacritics, baby.
Yeah, it's those diacritics will get you every time. I think it's notable too because Spotify recently made its search engine worse for classical music. So in other parts of the industry, maybe people are moving away from this searchability, right? Because the whole streaming idea is really built around pop music, where you're able to like enter in the name of the song, enter in the name of the artist, and that's all you need to know. But if you're looking for this one specific recording, of Beethoven or even a Russian composer where there's like 12 different spellings, you're out of luck. And I did test a couple of searchings side by side on Apple Music and Apple Classical, and the Apple Classical results are better.
Are they really? Yeah.
Yeah, that's in my mind the big advantage, because that was what they bought. They bought this company that was basically making that their whole thing.
So is there any like recording that you can't find on
That's
Apple Classical?
that's the problem that I have with streaming in general, and this is my biggest gripe here. Speaking as someone who likes the weird stuff, right? There are definitely missing pieces here, quite a few, and some kind of important recordings too. I realized that two of my favorite Carry On recordings, so the Tristan and Isolde with John Vickers and Barons, I believe, is not on there. Or at least it wasn't when I looked for it when I first downloaded the app, which is, I think, a pretty big one to be missing. There was another Carry On as well that was missing. There were some other smaller composers that were also missing, but like I would expect to be missing. Like you can't really find those to download on iTunes either.
Right.
Or on like Spotify. But there are some like holes. And this of course is my larger philosophical problem with streaming, is that when you're talking about live streaming, these contracts have to be renewed after a certain amount of time. So it's a lot easier to just have an album just disappear, go away forever, which is a problem if you're downloading as well, I will admit. But at the same time, like if you buy a CD, like one of my favorite operas to come out in the past 5 years, David Hertzberg's The Wake World. If you purchase the CD and it goes out of print basically immediately because it's an independent music label, which is what happened to this, you're good to go forever, you know, but you can't find it on any streaming that I've been able to find. And you can't find it on Apple Classical either. Another big problem that will affect a lot of people, a lot of those in-between classical pieces that are like, you know, this could be considered classical. This might be considered a little bit more, you know, indie rock influenced. A lot of some of the newer stuff, unless it's a big name, might not show up. And I think the biggest oversight to me is the actual way they put together your collection of music. You can add albums to your collection. You can favorite certain songs, certain works, certain composers. It's a kind of a cool idea. But if you look into your collection of albums, you can't search your collection. You have to search the entire database, which is a strange oversight because you can literally do it over on the normal music app. And I think that one of the things that holds people back from becoming streaming listeners is this idea of ownership, right? I feel like I own all of my physical CDs, my vinyl, even my downloads. I feel like I own, even if I technically don't, according to Apple's, iTunes, legalese. I feel like I own it. I don't feel like I own it as much when I can't search just my library.
Man, so like the search engine is really great in one respect and like really lousy in the other. That's odd.
I will say the sound quality is as good as it's going to get. It's better than CDs for source audio that is better than the original CDs. I've listened to some albums which sound as good as my CDs and some that sound better, which is pretty cool and pretty exciting. It is convenient. I think I am going to keep using it, which is kind of shocking for me. But I'm not going to abandon CDs completely, or I'm not going to abandon downloads completely, because you need to be able to have that backup and have something that you own in the case it goes away, But for average everyday listening, I think I recommend Apple Classical.
Well, this is not a paid promotion. I like.
No, it is not.
I like that you're hedging your bets a little bit here. Of course, I will never use this. I've only just managed to get Spotify to work. Although I will say, I have now listened to the coronation an additional 2 times since we last spoke. So I'm at pass number 5 on the coronation. 2-minute drill. That's always fresh. It's right now.
This just in, the 2-minute drill.
All right, listen up. Here's everything you need to know about what happened in Operaland this week.
A New York Times article details the aftermath of Placido Domingo's resignation from LA Opera following multiple allegations of sexual harassment. Audiences have yet to bounce back fully following the pandemic, which some administrators attribute in part to the loss of Domingo's star power, but the company is also doing better than ever financially and has begun forging an identity outside of Domingo that emphasizes new works. Quote, of all the major companies in the country, it is the youngest, says Opera America President Mark Skorka. I am very optimistic about the company.
The Met Opera Orchestra is going on an international tour for the first time in over 20 years. Audiences in Paris, London, and Baden-Baden will be able to see the orchestra this summer, along with soloists Russell Thomas, Angel Blue, and Joyce DiDonato.
Music journalist and critic Anne Majette has declined an honorary doctorate from the Cleveland Institute of Music due to the ongoing investigation of sex-based discrimination at the school. Said Majette, quote, I am not convinced, based on my many conversations, that CIM has acted in the best interests of its students and faculty. I hope and believe that the students and staff will take this gesture as a greater show of solidarity than my appearing in person could ever have been.
Opera in the Ozarks is getting some of that sweet, sweet Walmart money. The Walton Family Foundation is donating $34 million to the company in order to design and build a new theater, among other amenities. The new house will seat about 300 people.
In trade news, friend of the show, Chicago Opera Theater has a new general director. Lawrence Edelson will take on the role in July, taking over from interim GD Megan Smallwood. Quote, I have long admired Larry's vital contributions to opera, particularly through his work with American Lyric Theater. So says music director Lydia Yankovskaya. I am looking forward to working with Larry in this new capacity as he brings his extensive experience and creative energy to Chicago.
Lyric Opera of Chicago is getting its first ever artist in residence, soprano Whitney Morrison. The residency will include a pop-up mobile voice studio where the public can watch her rehearse for performances. Quote, I'm grateful to Lyric and the greater Chicago community for providing the opportunity to share and hone my craft, said Morrison.
Washington National Opera announced 2 new appointments that will oversee the newly defined artistic and production departments. Chelsea Antrim Dennis will join WNO as Director of Production, while Samuel Gelber has been promoted to the role of Director of Artistic Planning and Operations. On
the disabled list, soprano Nadine Sierra posted on social media that due to physical and vocal fatigue, she'll be unable to sing in the upcoming production of Rigoletto at the Berliner Staatsoper. Irina Lungu will take over as Gilda for the first performance this Friday, but a replacement for the rest of the run has not been announced as of this taping.
And on this day, May 15th, in 1567, it was probably the birth of Italian composer Claudio Monteverdi at Cremona. In 1759, Maria Theresia von Paradis was born, friend of Mozart. In 1771, Puccini's La Donna di Bell'umore premiered in Naples. In 1823, Raimonde's Le Finte Amazzoni premiered at La Scala. In 1858, it was the opening of the Royal Opera House at Covent Garden in London. That was actually the third opening, if you're keeping count. There was a fire in March of 1856. In 1939, it was the first performance of Douglas Moore's opera, The Devil and Daniel Webster, in New York City, and one just for me to finish it out. In 1993, it was the first performance of Steve Reich's opera, The Cave, at the Wiener Festspielhaus in Vienna.
And that's your 2-minute drill.
That was a little selection from Reich's The Cave. It's a very groovy little segment. I believe it's titled Genesis 21. This is actually, surprisingly, not one I'm super familiar with. I love Steve Reich. I think he's fun. I think he's very... I think sometimes his influence is a little bit underestimated, if such a thing is possible. He really is, I think, even more so than Philip Glass, the inspiration that a lot of post-minimal composers look to. Even though Philip Glass gets a lot of the glory for that, I really do think that Reich is sort of the OG there.
This is what happens, of course, when Oliver and Matt aren't on the show, is that Steve Reich becomes the playout for the 2-minute drill. Got some good stories here. You think we're kind of getting into the summer months and things are slowing down, but absolutely not. LA Opera. So here's the thing about Los Angeles, and this has nothing to do with Domingo. We'll get to that in a second. There's literally only one thing that you cannot be in LA. The only thing you can't be in LA is boring. If you are boring, that is the nail in your coffin. That is the inscription on your tomb, right? That city will handle basically everything except for boring. This is why pro football teams have struggled there, which lousy pro football teams. And so, Mark Skorka, he talks about what this company is doing well. Is it the youngest major opera company? It is, right? Because LA is a city on the western part of our nation, and so it's the youngest city. They've got celebrities, they've got money, they've got big ideas.
They've got traffic.
They got lots of traffic, and they're not boring. But how does Domingo's association and resignation from LA Opera, how does that change the ball game here, do you think?
It's kind of interesting. This is an interesting article. I encourage all of our listeners to go check it out because it's actually pretty thorough in terms of it's not really just about Domingo. It's really it makes the point in the article that in fact before Domingo was publicly shamed and taken out of this country hopefully forever, with I believe that one concert in Florida notwithstanding, they already knew that he wasn't going to be there forever. I mean, right. He's been, you can't rely on the star power of someone like that who's been around for decades and decades and decades, because he's going to kick the bucket eventually. And they were already trying some things to make sure that they still had an audience. And it did make the point. I feel like they were really part of the leading edge of major opera companies. I'm talking about, large companies, not storefront theaters or things like this, like major, big, heavy hitting companies that really helped start the trend of going towards new opera, which now even companies like the Met are imitating. Yeah. They are kind of in a better position because they got rid of Domingo early and weren't relying on that anymore. It's kind of a bit of a blessing in disguise almost. I think getting rid of Domingo is not a blessing in disguise. It's just a blessing. But there's certainly, I think that it can be very tempting for major opera companies to get a big name like Lyric has with like Renee Fleming, where you just have that big name and, it excites a certain subset of your audience, but it's only the part of your audience that already knows a lot about what you're doing, and the ones that would go anyway, right?
Well, you could also say that Los Angeles is a city which believes in the cult of personality. I mean, that Hollywood is based on the cult of personality. But what goes along with that in Los Angeles is that nothing lasts forever. You just have to look at Hollywood to see how they will pick up, elevate, chew up, and spit out one person over a number of years. So if Domingo wasn't going to basically take care of himself and force his own exit through the problems that he caused, eventually he was going to be tossed out. Maybe not by LA Opera, but by the city of Los Angeles as a whole. And then some other celebrity was going to take place. Now, is that celebrity now a person, or is that celebrity a movement? Is that celebrity an art form of doing more progressive and new works?
Yeah, I think that LA is a fascinating city for opera. I think that there are some cities in the U.S. that for whatever reason have not been conducive to opera. But I always say, to my friends who've never seen an opera before, there is an opera out there that you will like. I might not have a recording of it on me right now, but I know there is one. This art form has been around for too long and has covered too much ground and too many genres to not have something for everybody. And I think that LA has such a distinctive personality that just screams out for new operas. And I think it's a great model going forward for cities like that have a little bit of LA in them,
Well, Eureka Springs, Arkansas.
A little bit of LA.
A little bit of glamour.
so $34 million is a hefty chunk of change from Mr. Walmart and Company.
Exactly.
But I think the weird thing for me was that they're spending $34 million on a theater that only has 300 seats.
Apparently, there's some additional amenities.
I would hope so.
Expanded costume shop, housing. Of course, this is a summer program which has been running since the 50s. Alumni, including LaTonya Moore, Mark Delavan, and others who have gone on to perform at the Met. So it does have that residential aspect to it, and that is expensive. I will say $34 million goes a long way in the middle of Arkansas.
No, that's true. That is true.
You could talk about your supply chain issues for lumber, but let's be honest. That is a huge amount of money.
You could buy at least 300 seats for that amount of money.
Let's get this out over to Chicago. So, Chicago Opera Theater, a friend of the show here, Ashley Magnus, stepping down earlier this year, moving back to Michigan, getting into the brewing business, which I think is like there's a family connection maybe for her there. So they do a search, and they have a new general director, Lawrence Edelson. Mm-hmm. Lawrence, or Larry, as he goes by, as music director Lydia Yankovskaya said. So he comes to COT from ALT, American Lyric Theater, and I believe is retaining that post as well. So what does this hire bring and not bring to COT?
I mean, from what I know of Larry Edelson's work, I like what he does. I think he's going to be good in the role. I was a little surprised that they weren't going to go with someone who, we're not one to talk, you and I, George, here on this show.
This is the cis-het white man show,
cis-het white men.
Right now.
I don't know about the cis or hetness necessarily, but a white man certainly. I think that I feel like COT's big claim to fame just not so long ago when they when they hired Lydia Yankovskaya, I believe it became or maybe it was Ashley Magnus, I can't remember, whichever one came first or second. Once the second one was hired, it became the first regional opera company in the U.S. to have a female artistic director and music and general director, right. Which I think is fantastic. And I was hoping that maybe this was a direction they wanted to keep going into the future. I mean, no hate at all. I love COT. Full disclosure, I used to work with them quite a bit, and I love the company. But I really do think that I was expecting something along those lines. I will say, and you pointed this out, George. This does solidify their commitment to new opera. Absolutely. Which I think is exactly where COT wants and needs to be. So if he's the right guy for the job, he's the right guy for the job. And maybe we can get some more diversity in other positions as well. So
that's exactly what the hire says, right? Is that with Larry Edelson, what you're getting is someone who has been in this business a very long time. Of course, he started as the artistic and general director at Opera Saratoga. That was in 2014. He was with ALT at the same time as well. Recently initiated the Opera Writers Diversity and Representation Initiative, which was recognized in Musical America in 2021. So this is a guy who plays the long game and who really commits and follows through. And if you want to bring new works to the stage, which is where he's really made his name, that seems to be the brand and the mantle that COT is going to pick up in the coming seasons.
Yep, I agree. Speaking of developments in Chicago, we have this Whitney Morrison residency, which is really cool. I'm very excited about it. I want to talk about specifically this pop-up rehearsal space. She's literally going to have a little transparent trailer, and she's going to and they're going to drive it to various neighborhoods in Chicago. Yeah. And she's going to warm up, practice, learn her roles, in view of the public. It is simultaneously one of the zaniest ideas I've ever heard, but also honestly a great idea. I would love to like be out and about and just run into the Whitney Morrison mobile and seeing her process. I think it's going to be great. You know,
I don't know, man. Look, the old slogan in the NBA is "Don't hate the player, hate the game." Right? So I don't hate the player here. Whitney Morrison, look, she's a Chicago native. She went through the Ryan Opera Center. She's got chops. She's done a variety of work, most recently this season in proximity. I don't understand how this like demystifies the art form. It feels like a weird brand of performance art.
It does. But that's what I find appealing about it. I feel like the way they're framing it in their press is to people who have never who know opera, who like, you know, already go to the lyric and are like, I want to see some behind the scenes stuff. This is kind of a cool, quirky way to see that. But I think to most people who have never been to an opera or just like walking, you know, going to work one day seeing this, it's going to come across as performance art. But that in itself could be kind of interesting. Like I'm honestly kind of into it. It will come as no surprise to any of our listeners that I'm into weird performance art. So
you're going to get it. You're going to get it, bro.
I'm so excited for it. I really, really hope I run into this. I don't want to like seek out where she's going to be. I want to like organically come across her.
Well, good luck. I don't want to talk too much inside baseball because if you're not from Chicago, these locations for the Growing Room installation, as it's called, this is 4 locations in 2 weeks. Two of these are in the Loop, in the heart of downtown. Mm-hmm. And one's on the west side and one's on the south side. So I don't know how you're going to kind of stumble across this.
I don't know. Maybe I'll be downtown one day and just, you know, hear a little bit of a voice wafting through the breeze. And I'm like, I bet that's the box.
Okay. Going a little further afield then is the Met Opera Orchestra doing their first international tour in 20 years.
It's almost since London, 2002, Bonn. I believe.
Yeah, exactly.
Which is wild.
I assume David Krause, the principal trumpet for the Met, who we had on the show, and of course has his own show as well. I assume he's going on this tour. Yeah, I hope so.
I hope so. It sounds like a good time. I mean, it's the big 3, right? It's London, Paris, and Baden-Baden.
I mean, it ain't Berlin, but for the summertime, Baden-Baden, it's a spa town. I mean, it's
a nice place.
Town, so you know.
I think it's interesting that they're bringing back this Met tour. I'm kind of surprised it's the first one in this long. I wonder if they're like defining it strangely because I could have sworn they've done something at some point. I think it's the first international tour technically or something. Mm-hmm. But it did put me in mind of something that's been at the back of my brain recently. I think we are at a time now where the Met or companies like the Met of similar sort of, you know, stature should bring back Met touring productions of operas.
You've said this before.
I have. I know it's a big financial ask, but I think we're at a point where a lot of the bigger companies have grown some roots. We don't have the same like level of cutthroat competition that we had when during the heyday of these Met touring companies.
Right.
So they're not stepping on anyone's toes really. Even small regional opera companies, you know, might be doing like an opera or 2 per season in some of these smaller cities, or even decent sized cities. I think that now is the time to bring back Met tours. I really do.
It would never work because they already have their tours in the form of the Met in HD. Now, look, you can tour a Broadway show. I get that because they can crank out 8 shows a week. These are smaller sets. These are smaller orchestras. Weston, you and I both know there's no possible way you could tour a Met show.
Oh, I think you absolutely could. It would be expensive, but I think with the right opera, a small orchestra even, I think you could really, really do it. I really do. And because they've done it before. They could do it again, and I think now is a great time to reintroduce people to live opera across the U.S. who don't have the access to it. I often you know feel a little spoiled living in Chicago because I've got 2 or 3 opera companies in my backyard. You know, just and even more if you want to break it down to smaller like storefront companies. I'm just, I get reports from home sometimes. Back in Alabama, once,
Right.
bustling opera company 30 years ago is not so much,
Okay.
And I think that, you need that jolt from live performance from a big company like the Met
Very true.
to really sell it. And I think that, I think that in terms of extending its reach, the Live in HD can only go so far. People have all seen the ads for the Live in HD at this point. They're either going to go or they're not, And I think live gives you just that little edge, and I think this could be a great part of their new opera initiative as well,
Live gives you the edge. That I will agree with. Let's wrap this show up.
Good call. Bad call on Opera Box Score.
Man, it goes quickly when there's just two of us doing this, Weston. And that, of course, Oliver helping with the Ryan McKinny interview, helping to set that up and, of course, execute it as well. Big thanks to both of them. Good call, bad call. How we're going to take you home, starting with Weston Williams.
My good call is that I'm not going to be here next week because I'm getting married.
Wait, what? You taking a show off just to get married?
Yeah. I buried the lead a little bit there, but yes, I will be gone next week. So if the audio is terrible, you know who to blame, not me.
Your wife. That's awesome, man. Congratulations. I wish you both the best. It's super exciting. I finally have started watching Schmicago.
You've done it. You finally did it.
I'm just so behind on everything, but I am grateful to Cummings for tipping me off on Schmigadoon. And Schmicago is literally every bit as good. It's probably, for me, an even better series because the musicals are not golden age of musicals. It's the, gritty 60s and 70s musicals. Now I'm like, could there be a Schmopera? Could you do, a 6-part TV series that was all built around operas?
Oh, absolutely, you could.
It might be too much of a reach. I don't know. That is it for this week's edition of America's Talk Radio Show about opera. Make sure you subscribe to our show wherever you get your podcasts. Send us that voice memo or just email us your hot takes. operaboxscore@gmail.com. You can find stuff we've talked about and the links for those at our website, operaboxscore.com. And also, that is where you can put your money where our mouths are. Give back to the OBS on our donate page. Your announcer is Norm Waddell. Your creative consultant is Oliver Camacho. And your audio editor is Weston Williams. For our guest, Ryan McKinney, I'm George Cedarquist, asking you to continue the conversation about opera with your favorite cis-het white guy. We're back with an all-new show next week when I report back from the 2023 Opera America Conference in Pittsburgh. Plus, you get more opera headlines, more hot takes, and more $34 million theater seats. Join us.